Okay, well, welcome to another episode of the Rest and Recovery Podcast. With me is Rick Olderman. He is a sports and orthopedic physical therapist with more than 25 years experience, specializing in helping with chronic pain and pain-free life. Rick, you've created written a couple books, and you've created the Fixing You method around chronic pain and injuries. So, Rick, thanks for taking some time to join me.
My pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me, Scott.
So pain management, it's something every human being has to confront in some way, shape, or form, or some degree. And, I'm sure we'll get into it. Some of it's from physical fitness and the things we did when we were in our youth, potentially. But I'm sure a lot of it has to do with lifestyle and the good and the bad things that we have in habits. But maybe give a little background on you and how you kind of get started in PT and down this path.
Well, sure. Prior to PT school, I had back pain myself, and I really wanted to see what the insider secrets were, and surprised to find out that there weren't any. So I graduated from PT school with this sense of dread because I felt like I was missing something really important, and that kind of bore out in my first job in a sports orthopedic clinic. I could help people with, of course, acute injuries, sprains, strains, breaks, things like that, post surgeries. But anyone with chronic pain, I really was unsuccessful with. Yeah, and I felt like a miserable failure. I didn't feel like I was really cut out to be a PT, and I was sunk into a pretty deep depression because of it. And I was at this crossroads of, should I just quit this or should I try and figure this out? And I just decided to try and figure it out. And so that's what led me on this road to figuring out this new method of solving pain and understanding how the body works.
Yeah, that's a interesting backstory of like that big of a drop for you, just like, what's my purpose? Almost.
Yeah, exactly.
So what was a pivot for you that kind of re-energized you towards that path?
Well, after my first job, a couple of years later, I ended up coming here to Denver, and I went to work at a high-end elite sports and health clinic. Physical therapy, or not physical therapy, but a fitness center here. And they did not have a PT on staff, so I would be their first PT. Well, my schedule filled almost immediately with people who had chronic issues. And we're talking people from their 20s to their 50s.
Wow.
Who had expendable income, who had seen every professional around. And Denver has a lot of elite surgeons and, PTs and chiropractors and so forth. And I thought, that's when I finally realized, oh, it's not just me who's not doing well with chronic pain. It's everybody. There's something missing about how we're approaching chronic pain. And that, first of all, helped lift me out of my depression. And then secondly, I really, and part of it is, I know people a lot smarter than me were PTs and doctors before I came into this field. And so I thought, who am I that I should think that I could try and figure this out?
Right.
But really, I had no other choice other than I couldn't go on being a PT that I was, because I knew I wasn't good at it, especially with chronic pain issues. So I didn't want to quit because I really felt that this is what I wanted to do. And I just spent all this money and time and, studying. So I thought, okay, I've just got to try and figure this out. And that's kind of how it all began.
Yeah, that's a great story. I like a couple points on just the mindset piece of it of, finding that ppurpose and aligning it to your original vision, but also just recognizing, sometimes there's not a single button. Like, you kind of alluded to, it's not like a single pill or a single action is going to stop it, and we're just off to the races feeling wonderful again.
Right. Exactly. It took years for me to put all this information together.
So are there common denominators to, I'll say, the root causes of some of these chronic pains, or some prominent ones?
Yeah. So over the years, I've learned to break the body down into two kind of zones as far as treating chronic pain. The first is the back and lower body zone. So that includes anything from any kind of, back pain on down to the foot. That's all one system. And then the other system is neck and upper body system. And that starts with everything from the pelvis all the way up to the top of the head. So the back and lower body system, most pain that is occurring in these systems, chronic pain anyway, is due to, can be tied to how people are walking. And so that's what in addition to fixing all the tight or weak muscles and habits and so forth, no one got out of my clinic without learning how to walk correctly. And that's really what helped them maintain all the changes that we had maintained, is this gait pattern. In terms of neck and upper body pain and headaches, the main culprit is the shoulder blade system.
Mm-hmm.
That's the center of function for our upper body system. So once we solve that, chronic pain goes away.
Okay. Yeah. And shoulder blade. So from a shoulder blade perspective, I'm thinking as I'm sitting here even talking to you, we sit at desks all day, we drive a lot. And that posture seems like a major negative factor. It
is, but it's not in the way that most people think.
Okay.
So I'll just get my little skeleton here to explain.
Okay.
All right. So
those for listening to, jump on YouTube. This video will be available, and Rick is doing a demo here. Okay.
So basically, if you look at the architecture of the bones in the body, you'll see that most of our bones are these long bones, right? Long, thin bones.
Right.
But we have two areas of the body that don't have those. One is the pelvis. And we all know that the pelvis is the center of function for lower body and back system. All right. The other area is the shoulder blade. That's another broad bone. And so that's a center of function for the upper body system.
Okay.
Okay. So there are major muscles that are attaching into the shoulder blade that also attach into the neck and the base of the skull, all the way down the vertebrae and back in here. So if there's dysfunction in the shoulder blade system, it's transmitted via forces into the neck bones, into the base of the skull, of course, causing chronic shoulder pain and so forth.
Okay.
So most people think that, I'm slouching, so that's the cause of my neck pain and shoulder blades. And so how would you correct your slouching, Scott?
You just straighten up.
Right. So notice how when you do that, you'll notice that one of the ways that you do that is by squeezing your shoulder blades together to create a more erect posture. But that's actually deepening the problem.
Interesting.
So if you've ever been to a yoga class, you will have heard them use the cue, bring your shoulder blades down and back into their opposite back pockets, or bring your shoulder blades to your spine to create good posture, things like that.
Right.
Well, if you look at the architecture of the shoulder blade, it's not designed to create good posture. That's not its role in our function. Posture is created through our core. And so I'll show you a better way to do that. And once you get the shoulder blades out of the equation for creating good posture, then you'll find that a lot of chronic neck and headache and shoulder pain will start to melt away.
Okay.
So I'll show you what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
All right. So those of you who are listening, or even if you're watching, just go ahead and pretend like you're creating good posture like Scott just did, and sit up tight, sit up tall, and squeeze your shoulder blades together. And absolutely, it does create good posture, but it's the wrong technique to do that. So here's a better technique. So put one hand on your chest, and everyone at home do this, because then you'll feel what I'm talking about, the truth of this. And the other hand on your belly. So what I'd like you to do here is just go ahead and take a nice deep breath in. And you'll feel that the rib cage rises when you breathe in. And when you exhale, it falls. Can you feel that, Scott?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So now we're going to take another deep breath in. We'll feel the rib cage lift. And then this time when you exhale, don't let the rib cage go down quite all the way. It can go down 99.9% of the way, but not 100%. And what you'll notice is that when you don't let the rib cage fall all the way again, your stomach muscles have just engaged slightly, maybe 5%, maybe 10%. That's your core muscles holding up your rib cage. That's their job. That's why they're so big and broad. They're engaged to hold up our posture for us. So and you'll notice that if you just not let your rib cage come down all the way and just hold it up a little bit, it's going to engage naturally. You don't even have to think about it.
Yeah.
In fact, if you do think about contracting your stomach, you'll probably do it wrong, because then you'll be, engaging all those thousands of sit-ups that you've been doing over the years, right?
Right.
but that's gonna distort your posture. So it should be a natural, relaxed posture like this. So the second part of this equation then is to bring your arms down by your sides and just kind of jiggle your shoulders around and loosen them up completely. They should be like two dangling ropes by your sides. And you'll notice that now that you've relaxed your shoulders, you've probably already relaxed your core muscles too. And that's because you've tied your posture to your shoulders instead of tying it to your core. So what you have to learn to do is hold the rib cage up a little bit to engage the core just a tad and relax the shoulders at the same time. And that will start training your core muscles to hold up your posture rather than your shoulders and shoulder blades to hold up your posture. So what you've also done, and we can go deeper into the explanation of this, is when you relax the shoulder girdle system, you've now removed a lot of the stress that's being transmitted from the shoulder blades into the cervical spine and the base of the skull.
Wow. I hadn't thought about it. I mean, I've noticed the core is a major contributing factor, but I always thought it was like, kind of like you were saying, upper and lower, but a two-part system, so to speak. So is it like a pelvic shift, like, or
No,
your core muscle?
no, it's just pure core muscles. So really, and like I hesitate, to say contracting the core because a lot of people will record that and say, well, then the more I contract it, the more stable my back will be. No, the opposite, because then you start co-contracting a lot of unnecessary muscles.
Okay.
And you'll feel that when you're doing this exercise, letting your rib cage come down 99% of the way instead of 100% of the way, it's not a big shift in how you do things, but it is a big shift to turn on the core muscles like that. And your podcast is called Rest and Recovery, right?
Right.
Our bodies are not designed to work at 100% go all the time.
That's right.
And same with the core. Even though we've got all these layers and they're massive, we don't need to contract them 100% in order for them to do their job. In fact, if you've listened to interviews of athletes when they're in their zone and they've just had an amazing performance, they're not in their zone all tense. They're in their zone relaxed. And
right.
so that's what developing this awareness of your body and learning what matters really has huge payoffs and has huge ripple effects throughout the rest of your body.
That's pretty intriguing. And you mentioned the word awareness, which I think is a big one that, you can unpack on most of what we do from our lives, whether it's eating or what have you. But the awareness factor, because you mentioned the mental trigger of, what we've been taught is the shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
But then how do you connect the brain and body here?
Just like what we just did.
Okay.
So the brain will remember something that makes your body feel good. When your body's in pain, your brain doesn't understand why that's happening. It's just registering the pain. Your body needs to show your brain how to be not painful. So you'll find that when you start to change your posture, initially you're going to get your brain will set off all these alarm systems because you've done something different. Right. Just like I was listening to your interview with Jeff Rose.
Yes.
The massage there. Yeah. I loved what he had to say. And I absolutely agree. When you change something about how you're doing things, your brain's going to set off all these alarm systems. Now, here's the interesting thing. Not only will your brain set off alarm systems, but there's another part of your brain that's going to say that's wrong.
Right.
And it's saying it's wrong because it's different. And so what you have to show your brain is, oh, it may be different, but it makes my body feel better. And then your brain's going to realize, oh, wait, this is a good change then. And so then it's going to adopt that change more easily. And so in my clinic, what I would do is I would do test retest. I would test, okay, here's your pain when you do X movement. We do a treatment or some exercise or something to correct that. Now retest it. Oh yeah, my pain's a lot better. That's the exercise that we're going to be doing to solve your pain. And so they get this instant connection and says, oh yeah, this thing is different, but I do feel better when I do it. Right. So it makes it so much easier to adopt a new pattern when your brain knows it's the right pattern.
And I think that's a key point in that, it's easier, one, and it's doable, and it's something that we can get to, because I find, the habit forming is probably the toughest challenge no matter what we do.
Certainly. And then, are you wearing a watch, Scott?
Not right now. Normally I am.
Okay. So what I often suggest to people who wear watches is put your watch on your right wrist instead of your left. And what that will do is it'll annoy you to no end. But every time it annoys you, it will remind you to change what it is that you've tied that change to. For instance, lifting this rib cage a little bit. And you'll find, this isn't a huge change. I'm asking you to lift the rib cage maybe a millimeter, maybe a centimeter at tops, and relax your shoulders. So it's actually less work for your body to do something like this. So this should be something that you would embrace, as opposed to something I would ask you to do 1,000 repetitions of something else.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's it's a more gentle way of using your body, but it's the way the body's really designed to work.
Well, and I like that positioning of it is like you're teaching it to relax, which I think in our society with all the low grade stressors is a critical technique or practice that we all could stand to use.
Well, I mean, not only do we have low grade stressors, but everyone then goes out and does their training or their sports,
Right.
And adds on top of that low grade stressor all of this high grade stressor, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now I'm gonna make my body work so hard, and
Yeah.
so where does the rest come?
Exactly.
So if we improve our function, the rest will occur naturally.
Yeah, and unless and I think the other mental aspect, there's a lot of mental elements to this that somehow doing the right thing, whether it's physical or what we're talking about here, has to be strenuous. It doesn't have to be strenuous and a struggle.
Often it's the opposite, right?
Yeah.
You and Jeff talked about tension in the system. Well, that tension is excessive muscular contraction, right? Or fascial contraction. So, doing the right thing is often relieving that tension. So it should feel good, not like more work.
Right, 100%. And the other part that I noticed, because it correlates to habits, is the reframing piece. Because when you're that initial attempt to fix it or change the direction of our bodies, you're going to get that natural pushback based on the design of the body, that it's designed for survival. And sometimes it's not going to be, it's going to keep going down the negative path that we're trying to kind of swim upstream against, it seems.
Well, clinically, that never happened in my clinic. And the reason is because I proved to the patient that it was a helpful change. Always. Once you understand that it's a helpful change, there is no pushback. No one wants to be in pain. And once I prove that this is causing your pain, I mean, that's their motivation. I want to get out of pain. This is what you're going to do to do it. Okay, you've shown me that you're right. I'm going to do it then. And unfortunately, in a lot of, and I mean, it sounds very simple, but unfortunately, in a lot of rehab, we don't do that. We just throw exercises at people, kind of like throwing spaghetti against the wall, see what sticks, right? And hoping that it solves a problem that we haven't really more precisely identified. Sometimes it does, often it doesn't, and that's why we have chronic pain.
And so basically, it's not a one size fits all like that. What you just explained, the traditional PT model is valid but incomplete. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, it's incomplete. So I think it works really well for acute issues.
Okay.
And so for more acute issues, our model, because we're trained in PT school to identify the strained or damaged tissue and isolate that and whatever you want to do to that tissue, right? But it's not really working for chronic issues. Chronic issues our training in PT school, I describe as component thinking. So you got shoulder pain. Let's look at those tissues of the shoulder. You've got back pain. Let's look at those tissues of the back. But it's not really, when it comes to chronic pain, you have to really go out wider and look at it as a system instead of a component. And we're not trained to look at the body in terms of a system. I mean, I've trained many PTs at my clinic, all new grads, and none of them understood the body from a system standpoint. It was all completely new information for them. And granted, we need to learn component thinking to solve acute issues and pass our national boards. But when it comes to chronic pain, I truly believe this is why we have chronic pain, is because we're not using systems thinking. We're stuck in component thinking. So the therapist, massage, physical therapist, chiropractor, they're all using, and they may be excellent in their way that, and their, how they're using the information they've been trained in, but it's just not an appropriate hammer for that type of nail.
Right. So they're all helpful. It just may be using the wrong tool for the circumstance.
Exactly.
So, I mean, this might be a world peace question, but how does that get enhanced from a macro perspective?
Oh yeah. So this is what took me 20 years to figure out, right?
Right.
We shouldn't have to spend 20 years of our careers trying to put all these pieces together. So, not to toot my own horn, but I've created an online program to teach coaches, anyone from a coach on to a surgeon,
Okay.
how this all works together as a system. It's so much simpler to solve chronic pain when you understand how the body works as a system. Small changes create huge paybacks. And I'll describe one of those maybe about back pain if we get into that discussion. But I just wanted to go one step further, because I want people to walk away from this podcast with actionable tools to start solving and understanding their pain.
Yeah, great.
So before we move on to a different area of the body, I wanted to go back to the shoulder, neck, and headache area, because a lot of people suffer from this chronically. And I want to show you a really simple tool to assess whether this is a case for you. All right. The shoulder blades are the cause of your pain.
Okay.
So I'm going to get out my skeleton again. So I call it the armpit test. I developed it over the years because it's really simple to use, like a lot of the stuff that I do. And it says exactly what you're going to be doing with it. So if you're a patient, if you're a person with chronic neck pain or headaches, you're going to need someone else's help to figure this out. All right. So basically, you're going to stand there and someone's going to stand behind you. And you're going to turn your head to the left, turn your head to the right, look up, look down, and just get a sense of your pain, stiffness, range of motion, all that kind of stuff. Then you're going to have someone come in behind you, and they're going to put their hands in your armpits. All right. Mm-hmm. And then what they're going to do is they're going to lift up the armpits maybe a half inch to an inch higher than normal, the whole shoulder system. And then they're going to jiggle their arms around like that to make sure that you're relaxing your shoulders. Okay. You've got to relax your shoulders into their hands for this test to work. All right. So and that might take 30, 60 seconds, something like that. So once your hands are in there and they're pretty sure that they've relaxed, now what they're going to do is they're going to turn their head again to the left, right, up and down. And 99% of the people with chronic pain out there will notice that they feel more range of motion with less pain in all directions. And why? Because we've unloaded the connections from the shoulder blade to the neck and the skull. So This is confirming that what you have is a shoulder girdle issue that's causing your neck issue. Even if you have radicular symptoms down your arm, those radicular symptoms, and granted, they are coming from the neck, but what is causing the neck to compress those nerves? It's the shoulder girdle system. So it's this negative feedback loop that's been created. So, and then the second part of the test, now some people have been in so much pain that they can't relax their shoulders. Mm-hmm. And so they're going to say, oh, there's no change at all. Okay. Then you take your hands out and you give them back their shoulder blades, right? And so now they're faced with the weight of their shoulder blade again. And when you take your hands out of there, they're going to say, oh my gosh, now I feel it. They suddenly feel again the weight of their shoulder blades on their neck and head. This is confirming that the shoulder girdle system is the cause of your pain. Yeah. And to be honest, in the last 20 years, I can't remember the last person I treated for migraines, tension headaches, neck pain that hasn't been the shoulder girdle as the source of the problem.
Wow.
That common.
Wow. I mean, it kind of makes sense to me. Again, I think, I find myself leaning over, I'm hunched up, shoulders are up into my ears, and probably training my body to be in that position regularly.
Well, let's unpack that a little bit. All right. So if we just saw that if I lift up the shoulders, neck pain and headaches disappears or is significantly diminished.
Right.
All right. So what that's telling you is that your shoulder girdle system is resting too low. Right. Okay. So there's a small muscle called the levator scapula that attaches from the corner of the shoulder blade into the C1, 2, 3, and 4. All right. So its job, levator, means elevate. Its job is to elevate the scapula. So a lot of people feel with this chronic issue that their shoulders are resting too high.
Hmm.
because they're under tension. Well,
Right.
what that is actually the levator scapula trying to offset all of the depressor muscles. And for instance, when we first started out with posture, squeezing the shoulder blades together to create good posture, that depresses the shoulder blades. All right. So you've got this little pinky muscle trying to fight. I mean, this whole system weighs about 20, 25 pounds.
Right.
So you've got a little tiny pinky muscle trying to hold up a 25-pound system, plus all of the active muscles that you're engaging because you think you need to use your shoulders to create good posture, which is also depressing everything too. That's why it feels like the shoulders are resting up. They're not really resting up. It's just the levator scapula is trying to do that for you to offset all of this damage that you're causing by depressing.
So the
Does that
body's
make
kind of
sense?
sensing something and it's doing its job or overdoing it, and then it's kind of pulling it up or getting that
Yeah,
tension up.
exactly. And so a lot of people, that oh, my neck hurts right there, right there, and
Yeah.
everyone tells them it's their trapezius. Oh, you got tons of trigger points in there. No,
Yeah.
it's not the trapezius. The trapezius is a massive muscle. All right. It's the levator scapula that's deep to the trapezius that's causing all this problem. Why is it causing all this problem? Because the shoulder girdle system is resting too low.
Okay. And
And
then,
that test that we went over proves it.
okay. And then, so what's the closed loop? How do you
Yeah.
do that? All
How
the
do
way.
I how do you fix it?
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's say you have no therapist around to help fix your shoulder girdle system. But let's say that you work at a desk. So let's talk about ergonomics. All right. So when you work at a desk, your arm should be resting at the seam of your shirt here. All right. And if your arms are resting there, and the elbows should rest about a half inch to an inch higher than what they normally rest, as we just found in that test, that's a pain relieving position for you. So that's how you want to set up the arm of your chair, right?
Okay.
That makes sense.
Right.
So if my arm is resting up a half inch or an inch higher, and my elbow is at the seam of my shirt, this is exactly where the keyboard should be, right there. If you're an inch forward, now your neck and shoulder is holding up your arm again. All right. So make your desk fit your body rather than your body fit your desk.
Gotcha.
So a lot of people, even with the most expensive ergonomic chairs, the arms of the chair can't come in far enough to support those elbows. And if they can come in far enough, then they can't elevate enough to hold that arm in that correct position. So here's your really easy, cheap fix. Just bring a couple of pillows in from your home, your bed pillows, fold them in half and stick them between your waist and the arm of the chair. And you'll notice that that is a perfect platform for your elbows to rest on. And because it's a wider platform, you'll feel that you can rest more deeply
Mm,
into that position.
okay.
And then you've got your keyboard right there. And I'll tell you, for those of you with chronic neck pain or headaches, and especially when it occurs at work, if you do this, you're going to find within that first day, probably within the first hour of the first day, that your neck and head feels so much better in this position. No longer will you have to do this, which is what your levator scapula is trying to do for you all day long,
Yeah.
is to get out of this depressed shoulder blade position.
Dang. Wow. That's I think you just solved the 150 million people's problem
Yeah,
in the US workforce.
it's a lot easier than you think. All right. And then so let's go one step deeper. A lot of people use mice, right? Because they're working on spreadsheets or so forth. And
Right.
often that mouse is set up away from their keyboard somewhere over here, right? So I once solved a guy's 20 years of neck pain just by moving his mouse in closer to his body. Gone in a day. Never had neck pain again. That's how critical these changes are. So if you do a lot of mouse work, what I recommend people do is bias their keyboard over so that the mouse is more central. Because if you're doing all that work, then this should now be your keyboard instead of the keyboard, right? So
Right.
scoot the keyboard over, let that mouse be a little bit closer to you and central, and you'll feel that there's a huge relief to the chronic biceps tendonitis, shoulder strain, neck pain, headaches, all sorts of things.
Yeah. And that goes back to the point of like, we're a big system and it all interrelates in some way,
Yes.
shape, or form. So
Yeah,
the location of pain may not be the location of the issue.
correct. It absolutely is not the location of the issue. definitively. It's the weak link in the system.
So, what you've explained, is that part of the fixing you method that you've
Yeah.
created?
So what my method is a blend of approaches to, of course, this problem would create tight or weak muscles, which you need to solve. But really, why are those tight or weak muscles occurring? Because of how you're using your body.
Mm.
And as Jeff talked about in his talk with you, how you're using the body is also creating fascial tension, right?
Right.
And so ultimately, and this is what I love about your conversation with him, is that he touched on all of these elements of movement that affect fascial tension and integrity. All right, it's the same whether you're talking fascia or muscles or ligaments or whatever. It's all the same.
Yep.
How you're using your body is what is creating your issues. And so my program and approach solves how these issues are created, and also the tight or weak muscles that are contributing to their ongoing existence.
That's huge. Yeah.
And it's simpler, just like this. This is not complicated stuff, is it? It's really simple, right?
Yeah.
It's so simple you think, well, why hasn't anyone else said this? That's how simple this is. And so it doesn't have to, we can use lots of medically sounding words and make it really complicated sounding, but it's not really that hard. When you know what you're doing, it's really not that hard to do and explain to people.
Well, and I think that's a huge part is, sometimes the human condition can overcomplicate some of the things in life, and it may not be easy, but it is simple and straightforward.
Yeah, when I trained my therapist, that was the overriding comment that they all made is, I can't believe how simple this is. It's so simple to solve chronic pain. We just don't understand things from a system standpoint. Once you understand that, solving chronic pain is easy.
So for the practitioners out there, what do you have any recommendations to proceed forward or
Oh yeah, if you go to my website rickolderman.com, you'll see my practitioner program on there. I've also created downloadable home programs for people who aren't practitioners to solve their own pain.
Okay.
Because I believe inherently we should all have the tools within ourselves to solve our own pain. Because I'm not the cause of your pain, you're the cause of your pain. So it only makes sense that you know how to fix it, right? Rather than rely on me. So all of those home programs are there. They include things like we've talked about: ergonomics, how to change your life, stretching tight or weak muscles, taping techniques that I've developed that are designed from a systems standpoint to solve issues.
Okay.
Somatics audio lessons, which are designed to reduce neural tension throughout our bodies, usually that are occurring in these fascial superhighway, zones that are from the top of your head to the bottom of your foot. So it's very comprehensive, but it's also very simple.
I think that's huge for, probably buy-in, like you had mentioned earlier, and success of clients. I just lost my train of thought. I was going to ask you a question. Now I just lost it.
Well, I was just going to back pain is the other big thing that a lot of people are suffering with. So if you want to, we can dive into that, and I can show you really how I think about and approach back pain.
Yeah, that'd be great, because another area that selfishly would love to hear about.
Great. A lot of podcasters who interview me, we end up diagnosing their problems. So
sure.
if that's where you want to go with things,
just bill me later.
Okay. So here's another really easy test. And this is Scott, I like people to do my test because I want them to feel the truth in their own bodies about what I'm saying. Because, people who are just listening, sitting in their cars or whatever, if they're not doing what I'm saying, they're going to say, oh yeah, that makes sense. And then 15 minutes later, some slight emergency will happen that will divert their attention, and they'll never really connect to that information again.
Yeah.
So this is especially true for back pain because so many people suffer from it. So please try this test if you're at home. So I'm going to ask you to lie down on the floor with your legs straight. And we're going to lie there for maybe 30 seconds or so. And if you want, you can take your hand and you can slide it underneath your low back area. And you'll feel that arch underneath your low back, okay? And you can feel how, big the arch is or how small it is, whatever, but your legs are straight on the floor and you're lying on your back. And just notice how much discomfort you feel in this position, or if it feels wonderful for your back. Okay, so we've been there for about 30 seconds. Now I'm going to ask you to bend your knees so your feet are flat on the floor. And you'll notice right off the bat that your back starts to flatten into the floor as opposed to when your legs are straight. And most, probably 99% of the people listening will say, oh, yeah, my back feels a lot better in this position. And if you don't feel a difference, then go ahead and hug your knees to your chest. And your back will flatten even more into the floor. And this, you should notice a definitive change between legs straight or knees bent, in this position.
Right.
So most people doing this test will say, oh yeah, my back feels much better when my knees are bent. And they're going to say, oh, it's because my back is flatter. But that doesn't mean that we need to walk around with flatter backs all day long, right? That would be an unnatural solution. So here's the second part of the test. So let's now have everyone stand up and listen to the rest of this podcast. And what you'll notice is after about a minute or so of standing, you'll notice that you start locking your knees backwards in a straightened position. This is an energy conservation move that we employ so that we don't have to use our muscles to stand. Now we can just stand on our joints. So if you're not doing this already, go ahead and lock your knees straight. And you'll notice that there is some tension in your low back area. Now I'm going to ask you to unlock your knees and see what happens to that tension in your back. And if you're not sure, lock your knees again and feel the difference again. And you'll notice that when you lock your knees, your back is more arched. And we just found out on the floor that when your back is more arched, you have more pain. So what we've just figured out is that not only do you have more back pain when your back is arched, but your natural habit of locking your knees when you stand for any longer than a minute or two, or when you're walking, is also contributing to arching your spine as well. So every time you stand in line at the grocery store or the bank, or if you're walking during the day and you tend to lock your knees, every step or every minute you stand like that is a hammer that's hammering your low back because it's arching your low back. All right. So what's the solution? Well, unlock your knees. So you just soften your knees and you'll notice, and I've solved lots of back pain just with this one tip alone. I have people unlock their knees and in 3 days, they're 50, 75% better if they have this pattern going on in their backs. It's that simple. A lot of it, Scott, is just removing the hammers that are hurting our bodies. Our bodies have the natural ability to heal already inside them. If we cut our finger, it heals. If we break a bone, it heals. So if that's not happening, it's because something is in the way. And what we're doing is eliminating those obstacles for your tissues to heal.
Yeah, I think that's so huge. I love the message of we're designed to heal. I mean, that's the body's
Absolutely
the system.
Yeah.
As we kind of touched on earlier, sometimes it does fight against itself or over indexes in that direction. But I think the key one is awareness. Really being cognitively aware of how our body is moving, just enough to be. Help me on this is just enough to be cognizant of its position, so not to be in those hammer positions.
Well, what will motivate you to become more aware?
Right.
If you eliminate your pain.
Right.
By doing it, adopting it, right? Just like with the shoulder blade and lifting the rib cage example we made.
Yep.
Right. If you show that solves pain, people are motivated to become more aware. And if unlocking the knees shows them that their back pain is better, well, then now they have extra motivation to become aware. So, it's nice to say, and this is what I'm afraid a lot of what happens in medicine is we give people things to become aware of, but we haven't proven to them that this is the source of their pain.
Right.
Or, that's exactly what the last 10 people told me, but I still have pain, right?
The symptomatic diagnosis, not really.
Exactly. So the test retest is the way that you have to figure things out and prove to yourself that this is going to solve your pain.
Yeah.
So what I do with people with this, and to take the awareness part out of it, is I put a little piece of tape on the backs of their knees, so that when they lock their knees, it stretches that tape and tugs on their skin. And then it reminds them, just like that watch on your right wrist, right? Yeah. It's going to remind them, oh yeah, I've got to unlock my knees. It's like a miracle. And they come back 3 days later, it's like, I can't believe that stupid little change solved 50% of my back. Haven't felt this great in years. So this is one of the patterns of back pain that most people are undergoing. We can go into another one that is responsible for more unilateral or sciatic pain if you want, or we can go into other things if you like. It's up to you.
Yeah, I mean, I know sciatic is another major issue for a lot of people. I've run into it myself at times and some family members that
Sure. You want
and
to talk about it?
yeah, dig into that because I think that's where it starts to really dig into and keep me honest is the neurological impacts um, to us.
Well, as with everything I do, I'm going to really simplify things because that's really how the body works. Okay. Once you see it, it's so easy to understand and solve. So, unilateral back pain or sciatic pain down one leg or SI joint pain is all due to a particular pattern that's occurring in the body. And what's going on is typically the side that has pain, that side of the pelvis is higher than the other side, and
Mm-hmm.
that side of the rib cage is lower than the other side. So I call this a side bending problem. All right, because I like to name things simply. And so you can see that if you have a side bending problem, you're going to create compression here where there's side bending because it's squeezing everything. Well,
Yeah.
that's where the nerve roots of your back of your side, nerve come from, as you know. So this is one of the sources of the problem. It's very easy. In fact, we can change that pattern in 5 seconds. But really what we have to understand is why is this pattern happening in the first place? Okay.
Yeah.
So this pattern is occurring because of some older problem in that leg. And what your brain has done over the years is saying, you know what, I've got to get off that thing. So I'm just going to make this little adjustment and hike this hip up a little bit. Well, the muscles that are hiking that hip up attach to the rib cage. So now they're going to pull the rib cage down too. So you create the side bending problem. And that plantar fasciitis or that sprained ankle that you had years ago that you just blew off and you said, it's going to heal on its own. Well, now it's manifesting as unilateral back pain or SI joint pain or sciatica because of this very reason.
Wow. So there's a cascading effect uh,
Yeah. It,
to the
yeah.
little things.
There's a book called The Body Keeps the Score.
Yeah.
This is how it happens. So you can't walk because your goal as an athlete is to get from A to B as quickly as possible. Your brain's going to say, okay, I'm going to get you from A to B as quickly as possible. You didn't say it was important how I was going to get you from A to B as quickly as possible. So what it's going to do is, okay, I'm just going to hike this up because you're going to make me run on that leg like that. Well, then I've got to do something to get off of that pain.
Yeah. It's like
And so these are the
defensive
exactly
response for the body
right. So
attempting to protect itself.
exactly. So that's all it is. These compensations are your brain's way of wiggling around, shifting the jigsaw puzzle pieces so that you can finish that race, that training, or going to the grocery store.
Yeah. Yeah. Or
Yeah,
pick up your kids. I mean, the young parent problem that, you're overcompensating with the one on the hip or whatever, especially
exactly.
probably more for moms than dads, but all the above. But
Exactly. Insert goal or habit here,
yeah.
and that's what happens. And so ultimately, to solve this from a long-term perspective, we can certainly solve it from a short term really fast. But to solve it from a long-term perspective, you'll ultimately have to solve the reason it's happening in the first place. And you won't have to wonder about that reason because once you start correcting how you're using your body, you're going to expose what that weak link was in your system that caused all this in the first place very quickly.
Yeah.
Because now you're not compensating for it anymore. And then you know what to solve.
So in that instance, what would be a tactical activity to kind of help offset that type of thing?
Yeah. So like I said at the very beginning, how we walk is ultimately where almost all lower body and back issues are manifested. So like I said, no one gets out of my clinic without learning how to walk correctly. Walking correctly will expose what the vulnerabilities are in their system. So first, we of course we'll fix the elevated pelvis and the rib cage and all that kind of stuff. We'll loosen and strengthen whatever needs to be loosened and strengthened associated with this pattern. Then, when we ask you to start doing the whatever activities it is that you're trying to do, that's when, if all of this is corrected and you're walking correctly, that's when we're going to run into where the true restriction is: the ankle, the knee, the hip, whatever.
Okay.
And then we solve that.
Awesome. It again, kind of your comment on when you teach other PTs this and they're just blown away how straightforward and simplistic it is, it really is pretty mind blowing.
It is. It's so easy. So let me show you the connection between something like this and neck pain. So let's go all the way up. So if you have something, wrong here, and then you're creating this side bending problem, right? And the rib cage is down too. Well, the shoulder blade rests on the rib cage. Well, we've just learned that the shoulder blade is the main cause of chronic neck and headaches. So if the foundation where the shoulder blade is resting is off, that's going to throw the whole shoulder blade off too.
Yeah.
So isn't it simple? It just makes intuitive sense that this is how it works. This
Right.
is how it works, but this is not how we're taught to look at things.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. So let me ask you this. Does it make sense though? And I know, pretty sure you're not saying this, but physical fitness would help build the muscles around it, but you need the good form and function first to build that muscle. Otherwise, you're kind of building muscle around, the inappropriate methods or
Absolutely, absolutely. So a lot of people come in and say, "Why do I have hip pain? I walk for miles a day. I don't understand." Well, it's because you're not walking right. What? Yeah. So let's fix your walk, and then your walking will now feed your hip instead of breaking it down. And that's the way it is with the body. How you sit will now feed your body rather than breaking it down.
That's huge. Rick, I still can't believe how straightforward this is, but I really appreciate, your insights, the methods you've come up with. I plan to apply them myself uh, pretty soon after we get off of this.
Okay. It's a lot easier than you think. I'm
Yeah,
telling you, Scott. Yeah.
yeah.
And so, the downloadable home. So I wrote my books 10 or 15 years ago.
Okay.
And that was as a result of, I took this course, which got me on the road to figuring all this out. And I met a PT there, and we both graduated from this course at the same time. And I said, "Hey, how's this course working for you?" And he said, "I might use it for home programs, maybe." Because I said, "What are you talking about? This is amazing. It's solving chronic pain." He says, "Yeah, but I'm a manual therapist, so it's not really my gig." And that's when I realized that we as practitioners have a belief system
Mm-hmm.
of how we think things should be solved. And if things aren't fitting in our belief system, then we kind of filter that out. And that's when I realized, oh, this guy's patients will never experience what it means to solve a systems problem because he believes he should be fixing everything with his hands. And so that's when I wrote my books, to do an end around practitioners and take it directly to people, is because of these belief systems. It's not only medicine, it's law, every industry you can think of, politics. We all have belief systems that
Yeah.
we filter information through. And so this is, fortunately, I had been so unsuccessful as a physical therapist, I hadn't yet had a belief system installed yet. So I was just looking for anything that was helping. And this was a key issue.
Awesome. And remind folks listening how they can locate you.
Oh yeah, all my books and programs and so forth are on rickolderman.com.
Okay.
And whatever you purchase, except for my books, they're sold through Amazon, but there are links to them there. But if you purchase any of my home programs or the practitioner's training course, if you type in Fixing You, FIXINGYOU, all one word, you'll get 20% off.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Rick, I appreciate all that you're doing in fixing a systemic chronic pain issue that, pretty much every human being has to deal with. So I do like to close things out with a couple personal problems, a bit of a hot seat. So what are you reading right now?
I'm reading is Eric Orton's The Cool Impossible.
Okay.
Have you read it?
I have not heard of it. How is
it? He is an ultra runner and trainer of ultra runners.
Okay.
And he was Chris McDougall's. He's the guy who trained Chris McDougall to run with the Tarahumara Indians in his Born to Run book.
Oh, cool.
So, and Born to Run has just come out too. I also just read that one as well.
Awesome.
So I'm changing my running pattern because it's not working for me anymore.
Kind of like the walking, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I have to do it too, folks.
Yep. So what is your go-to rest and recovery method?
Really, using my body well, because we didn't get into it, how the body does rest and recovery while it's working.
Hmm.
We can do that maybe in the future. But if you use your body well, part of that equation is not just strength, it's about relaxation while you're using it. Kind of like that little brief example I made about elite athletes who are in their zone.
Right.
They're in their zone because they're relaxed. And so that's the key to rest and recovery, I feel, is not getting too stressed out in the first place.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Well, Rick, appreciate everything. And yeah, thank you so much for joining me and on all that you're doing. So look forward to seeing you in the future.
All right. Thanks, Scott. Thank you for your time.